The purpose today here is to really kind of give you an idea of what you can do to protect your career. The green pamphlet that we ask you to have a copy of, this is your Allstate insurance policy for protecting your career. If you are a coach, if you are a principal, if you are a teacher, do not coach, do not manage, do not teach without following the Code of Ethics and Principles of Professional Conduct. Now recently, I was in another city helping out another district during an investigation, and I noticed on the news this particular article. I want to read it to you. A 28-year-old licensed teacher from Pittsburgh, Geraldine Alcorn, is accused of sending more than 2,400 texts to an 11-year-old female student, where she expressed a deep love for the child and talked of running away with the minor. The child's mother first discovered messages from Alcorn on her daughter's iPod, along with handwritten letters, labels, things Ms. Alcorn and I can do, and what we can do, and when we can do it. The reason I share that with you, ladies and gentlemen, is that in the past 20 years, it's almost as though the school systems throughout the state, throughout our country, if I can use a parable, have been like the old story that we learned in elementary school about Rip Van Winkle. You remember that story where Rip went to sleep for 20 years, and when he went up the mountain and he came back down, when he first went up, there was a picture of King George. But when he came back, it was George Washington, the first president of the United States. The big thing about that story is almost Rip Van Winkle slept through a revolution, a time and change. As an investigator, I feel like a lot of us are asleep in the past 20 years, and we're sleeping through a revolution of change. What do I mean by that? Particularly social media. I cannot tell you the amount of investigations I have conducted against administrators, against teachers, against principals about social media. There's texting or sex texting or putting things on Facebook. It also has value in social media, but it's getting a lot of our administrators and educators into trouble. So I want to share with you, before I leave, to make sure you understand your role as educators in regards to the Code of Ethics and Principles of Professional Conduct. First and foremost, it is painful that I share with you that every day, or if you go on the media tonight, all you have to do is Google discipline against Florida educators, and you're going to find out that a lot of people are just violating our policies. Some of our sharpest people, and that's you, some of our most intelligent people, and that's you, innovative people, people like yourself in this audience, are violating the Code of Ethics and Principles of Professional Conduct. Now yesterday, I was again in another city meeting with an administrator, and this person had the attorney, and I spent an hour with this person. The point that I'm making, whether you have an attorney, whether you have a union representative, or whoever you may have, if you violate what's in this green pamphlet, you're subject to discipline of your license. So it's critical that you understand what is in this particular pamphlet. Now, I'm going to go over some of the issues with you, but one of the things I want to share with you is how to avoid legal complications with students. Now, it's important that we recognize that our role as educators, as stated in the policies, is we're here to exercise the best judgment on behalf of who? on behalf of the students. Now, why do I share that? Because oftentimes when I do an investigation, it appears too many people are exercising the best judgment on behalf of themselves. It's almost as if they got this thing mixed up about, I came to serve and not be served. We want people to look up to us. But when I conduct an investigation, you need to understand one of the primary things I'm looking at, did you exercise the best judgment on behalf of the student? Not the principal, not the parent. Do you exercise the best judgment on behalf of the student? And that's written in state law. That's not Farley's opinion. That is what I look at as an investigator if, in fact, you come up for a particular investigation. Now, keep in mind, about 3 months ago, I went to the superintendent because we have about 20 open cases right now. And I said to her, I said, now, we have got to do something more proactive. Now, all these cases are not necessarily formal, but there are cases where people have come to complain. And I shared with her, we need to do something that makes sure that people understand what they can and cannot do. Unbeknownst to me, Andy Johnson and his group, you all already had put this together. So this was a good mix to kind of come together and talk with you. I want to encourage you, even though there's not time today, but I want to encourage you to call or talk to me later and ask me a lot of questions, because I'd much rather for you as an educator to ask me questions before an incident occurs, because once it occurs, then the investigation is on. Let's look at this thing, avoiding legal complications with students. Number one, maintain a professional barrier between you and the students. You are the adult, you are the teacher and the professional. Act like the expert and not like one of the kids. Now, we have some people that it's critical that they be liked, and they're too close to students. What the policy states is that there is a separation. You're the adult and they are the students. Refer students to appropriate resource person for counseling and or discussion about personal matters. There's no place in your job to discuss personal matters with students. You need to refer that to other people. As a former mental health therapist for Bridgeway, I know even as a therapist, I cannot get into people's personal matters. You have to have that particular separation. Treat each student with respect, know the student's rights, know that there's no corporal punishment. Now, there are some people who feel that they can interact with individuals by belittling them, by sarcasm, by putting your hands on them. Please keep in mind, if you put your hand on another individual without their permission, that's simply battery. You don't have a right to do that. Now, I want to say something specifically to coaches, because you have some of the toughest jobs in the world of motivating people. But please keep in mind, if somebody asks me, I'm here to jump on coaches in Title IX, I'm not here for that, but I am here to say it's critical that everyone understand there is only one code of ethics for everybody here in this room. We don't separate it, one for administrators, one for teachers, one for coaches. We're all with the same code of ethics. I'm saying that to you because as you motivate people on the field, do you have a right to get all up in their face and berate them and things of that nature? Well, your answer's in that green pamphlet. So you exercise the best judgment for kids. I'm sharing that with you because if you look at some articles and some of the lawsuits that are coming out, people have been fired for doing just that. Just recently down in Winter Park, some coach told the players, go flatten the other coach. So what did the kid do? He go flatten the other coach. He did what the coach asked him to. So my point is, again, exercise the best judgment on behalf of the student. It is painful that I share if you look over some of the statistics. I just want to share with you. The superintendent in Atlanta arrested along with 12 other teachers for cheating violation. I mean, physically arrested. Failure to report. Coaches. I know there's like a code of silence in every field, every business. Here's a heads up. If you know of a violation is occurring, if you know of a violation is occurring, and this especially, I'm talking to the principals, if you know that a violation is occurring and you don't report it, and then it gets investigated, then you're culpable too. So not only are we going to take action against the person who violated it, we're going to take action against the administrator who is aware of that particular violation. It seemed like a lot of things happened in Florida as I was doing my research to say Florida Teacher of the Year was fired for writing on Facebook his views on gay marriages. Oftentimes I get people saying, I just want to be me. I just want to be myself. I think there's a popular book out to say, can I wear my nose ring to the interview? The point that I'm making is that under the Code of Ethics, all of you are held to a higher standard. And the reason why you're held to a higher standard, there was a Supreme Court decision called the Adams and the Tumberland case. And the results of that case stated, because you interact with our most precious resources, and that's children. You interact with our most precious resources. Parents trust you with their kids. And because you interact with our precious resources, we're holding you to a higher standard. So the message I want to get across to you today, be very, very careful about that social media. Even if it's in your so-called off time. I'm off from work, so I want to get on Facebook and I want to do my thing. And I want to tie it back to the school and I want to put kids' pictures on it. We've had actual cases. I only just gave you cases in the state of Florida, but I would tell you in the last year, I've had 7 cases of social media. Right within Okaloosa County, people are using that social media, not exercising the best judgment for students, but exercising the best judgment for themselves. We've had people in our district who made negative comments about other coaches in other districts. Violation of the Code of Ethics. You need to know that. That's a heads up. What happened to sportsmanship or being fair, that type of stuff. And keep in mind, you are the leader. So the students are looking at you. So if you're acting inappropriately, what type of example are you setting for the students? I want to kind of give you a brief summary to make sure that we understand what the Code of Ethics is all about. You know, we do a lot of research about bullying, and we talk about bullying in regards to students. But I want you to think with me for a second, do we as administrators, teachers, coaches, do we sometimes bully people? And are we guilty of this policy of bullying? Let's do a self-test on bullying. You can answer this to yourself. If the answer is yes, give yourself 5 points. If it's no, you put 0. Is there a person or group you regularly make threatening comments to or give intimidating looks to at work or school? If you do that, give yourself 5 points. If not, 0. Number 2, does it make you feel better when you do this, to put people down in front of other people? Now, I have to share with you, sometime I attend some of your sports event or several activities, and I'm looking, and I'm just looking how people interact, because sometimes people do this in the name of coaching. The Bobby Knight days, the Woody Hayes days are over. There was a time that was all in. And some of us behave in a manner that how we were coached. So how we interacted with our codes is what we bring to the table today. And what I'm sharing with you in regards to the code of ethics and the principles of professional conduct, that's out. You have to treat people with dignity and respect. Question number 3. Is it possible that you hurt somebody or taught someone else it's okay to do the same thing? If you think yes to that, give yourself 5 points. If you think no, 0. Have you ever posted or forwarded a hurtful comment about another person on the internet? Just wrapped up an investigation a month ago here in Okaloosa County. Somebody got something on the internet and they inappropriately shared it with other people. That is a violation of the Code of Ethics. See, the Code of Ethics is sort of like your guideline to kind of make sure we don't have chaos. See, to do otherwise, then everybody's just out doing their thing. If you teach, if you coach, if you manage, do not do any of these things without abiding by the Code of Ethics and principles of professional conduct. Do you only put others down when it is in front of a group? Some people don't like to get off unless they got an audience. Do you do that and say it's for their benefit? Do you have that logic that somehow that's going to make people perform better? Do you do this? These are some of the characteristics of a bully. Would it bother you if someone did the same thing to you? Please keep in mind that these are characteristics of a bully. So in summary, I just want to kind of go over with you the key guidelines for the professional ethics that we all have signed up for. Let me say that again. We all have signed up for that because anytime we do an investigation, my first trip is to the school district to pull your file. All of you have signed a form, a contract that say you will abide by the Code of Ethics and the principles of professional conduct. If you choose to do something different, then you're choosing that behavior. In the Code of Ethics, they have something called the NEAT process. This is something you managers, you principals should be doing with your subordinates. And I hope everybody understands what the NEAT process is. I want to go through what those letters mean. N, there's a notice that something is wrong. That's what I'm doing for you right now. This is a notice that something is going wrong. We're getting too many investigations in violation of the code. That's your notice. E, an explanation of detail. I've tried to give you examples of explanation of what you need to do. I would encourage people at least monthly read that Code of Ethics because in there it will give you the guidelines. Now, one of the things that I see a lot is exposing students, intentionally exposing students to embarrassment and disparagement. You know what I'm talking about? You getting all up in their face, telling them what to do and all that kind of stuff. I guess it relieves some stress from you, but it violates the Code of Ethics. Now keep in mind, Mr. Farley never makes any decision on an investigation, or when I go to Mr. McGinnis, our attorney, we don't make the decision. It's the policy and your action that we put together. If your action does not go along with what the policy say, then in fact, you are in violation. A, assistance. It's part of the NEAT process. Number A is assistance. This is what this is. This is assistance. We're letting you know. I think Steve Chapman will be coming around to a lot of the schools. He's got a lot of people signed up. He's going to let you know about the reporting requirements. It's critical. It's by board policy when you deal with stuff of a sexual nature, of a racial nature. You must report that to the equity office. We don't want the situation that happened up in Pittsburgh where this 11-year-old girl received these thousands of texts and nobody has notified the proper authority. All of you here are mandate reporters. If you see something going wrong, you must report it. If you're dealing with something of a racial or sexual nature, you must report it to Mr. Chapman. Last but not least, T, time to correct it. And we're giving you the time to correct it. That's why Title IX in our reports to Andy, a lot of you have to do that. We're giving you the time to correct it. In summary, let me just tell you, there's not a right way to do the wrong thing. A lot of times people do things based on saying things without thinking. I have a little poem I just want to share with you that may help you to not say things without thinking. Now, I know there's a lot of parents out there who are experts at pushing your buttons. There are parents out there who get a pleasure out of pushing your buttons. I think from a therapist's point of view, we used to call that Munchausen by proxy, that people actually feel good pushing your button and keeping you going. But please keep in mind, before you say something to somebody, it's critically important that you think about it. Think about this little poem when you're interacting with somebody negative or difficult. It states, if your lips you wish to keep from slips, 5 things observe with care. To whom you speak, of whom you speak, how, when, and where. Let me say that again because I find a lot of cases where people say stuff, but they can't take it back. If your lips you wish to keep from slips, 5 things observe with care. To whom you speak, of whom you speak, how, when, and where. If I stop to think before I speak, I won't have to worry afterwards about what I said before. In summary or in conclusion, I want you to know that it's not what we eat, but what we digest that makes us strong. It's not how much money we make, but how much we save, determine whether we have a good retirement. It's not what we read, it's what we remember that will make us intelligent. But most important is not what we profess, but what we practice. It's not what we profess, but what we practice. Again, from a psychological point of view, some of us have cognitive dissonance. We know the right things to do, we act out differently. We know in our minds the right thing to do, but we act out differently. Before I leave, I do want to say I appreciate all the work that coaches, ADs are doing. You have a tough job. Teachers, we are in one of the better districts. But to salute you, I'll leave you with this one last poem. It kind of indicates how our world is today. It's a soap opera poem. It simply states, as the world turns, in the days of our lives, all of our children are young and restless, living on the edge of night in a secret storm, attempting to be bold and beautiful with no guiding light. They should wind up in General Hospital in their search for tomorrow, not realizing they only have one life to live. Thank you.
Our basketball coach, old school. He kept every form on file with him at practice and required it of all of his coaches, whether it be at practice, whether it was in conditioning, whether it was during a game. He had a copy, because the trainer had the original. He had a copy of every kid's form that was required, and he kept it in a binder, and he kept it on him at practice and at a game and at off season whenever he had a kid on a court or on a field. That was our basketball coach. He was old school. So the basketball situation, we were good. We were okay legally. That's what I mean by that. Legally, we were okay. Track situation, not so much. Track situation, we had a newer track coach. And during that time, our newer track coach and our athletic administration department went through a bit of a change, a little bit of a transition. And after the first time that she passed out, the question was, okay, where's her EL2, EL3? Track coach, got her EL2, EL3? That's all we got. Okay, we got to get an EL2, EL3 on this kid. I think there was the EL2, but not the EL3. And she was participating. So we got the EL3. We got the EL3 signed, we made sure we had it. Didn't know that it was going to happen again, but she wasn't going to recover from whatever the issue was. So this is why I say this to you, and I promise I won't be up here long. The required paperwork is more important than anything else that you can have for your students. Their safety, their health is more important than anything else at this point in time. Whether you win the game, whether you lose the game, whether they're superstars or not, for multiple reasons. Because with that track situation, they attempted to sue. And the track coach was brought into the lawsuit. Because your job as a coach, he was a teacher as well, but your job as a coach, one of your responsibilities when you sign your name on the dotted line and you say that I'm going to coach these kids, is to ensure their health and safety, to ensure that they've done everything that's required of them to be able to participate on your team or at your school. As a principal, as an athletic director, as a coach, that is your responsibility. That is your job. Just like you're supposed to keep them safe in the classroom, you're supposed to keep them safe on the field. That is your responsibility. And without the paperwork, proper paperwork completed, all of it, not just one thing, without all of it completed, you haven't done your job. Let's just be honest. You haven't done your job. You have not looked out for the welfare of each and every one of your students or every one of your athletes if every form isn't completed and in your hand. And is it really something that you want to risk your job over 3 forms or 4 forms or whatever the required forms are for your school district and for the Florida High School Athletic Association? Is it worth risking it? Because that's where you are, pretty much. So, EL2, it's required. It's good for 365 days. It is required. The EL3, it is required to be fully completed. A best practice, I know we go over best practices later. My guidance, my suggestion to you, I wouldn't let a student practice without it. Without me as a coach saying or knowing however your system is, whether your AD gives you a pink card or whether your AD gives you a copy of the packet or whatever it is. Me as a coach, I'm not going to put myself in that situation without knowing for sure every student who comes out to try out, not just practice, but try out, has the required documentation. I can't put myself on my kids. My kids love to eat too much, so I got to keep a job. I can't put my job on the line for one student, not for paperwork. Okay? Yep, Justin.
Just want to jump in. She's mentioned the EL3 in your green packet. You'll see the EL3 is the parental consent form. Just some things that I recall seeing, and she did mention it. Make sure it's completely filled out. Year in and year out, we used to run into, it's half filled out, it's signed in one area, but they don't list their insurance information. Again, make sure all the forms are completely filled out. Going back to the EL2. Sorry.
If I can, now I guess is an appropriate time as we're going over these forms. For you high school coaches, EL2 is the first form that you'll find.
He said EL2 is the first form that you'll find in the folder.
EL3, CH, is the second form in your high school. And EL3 is the third form.
For the high schools, if you look in the top right-hand corner, there's a black box. It'll tell you what those forms are, and I believe it's going to announce the middle schools, I believe, in this county have a separate form.
Middle schools, your first form, comparable to the EL2, is MIS 6347. The second form in middle school folders is the heat and concussion. It's the same form. EL3-6. And the third form in middle school, comparable to the EL3. Excuse me, middle school, we have no comparable form to that. We do have similar information in a form that's coming up that I'll go over when Justin and Natalie conclude, okay?
Thank you. And going back to the EL2, which again is the physical exam form, just looking at that again, just trying to share some things that we've seen. Unfortunately, being involved with scenarios that Ms. Strappian mentioned, that they get ugly very quickly. 365 days from when the form has a date on it, when the physician saw the student athlete. Look at those dates. Those are very, very key. I had a wrestling kid compete in the state tournament. His form expired 2 days prior to the tournament. Unfortunately, when he wrestled a kid, there was an issue that arose. You don't want to be behind some of those issues. So that physical exam form, that EL2 you see on the top right, again, that date is crucial. That's why we have in the CDC program, which we'll go over kind of the end of this, but that date is a crucial part. Make sure you have that date clearly, you know what it is, and when it's signed by that physician, when that student athlete went in to see that physician.
Just another little suggestion, or not even a suggestion, but a little tidbit, and this is for the athletic directors, principals, county office. For these forms, for your EL2, that's the first form, and the EL3, which is your second form, these forms are by school. So when you have a student that transfers, the front page of the EL2, needs to be your school's form. So if the student was at Choctaw High School and now they're at Fort Walton Beach needs their own form. The physical you can keep, but the front page, it needs to have your school's name on it. Same for the EL3. The EL3 needs to be signed or completed again for your new school or the student's new school. Okay, it's not transferable, and that's what it says at the top. The physical itself is, but not the form where the parents fill it out. Yes, ma'am.
You're not changing these forms anytime soon?
Of course, you would ask me that question. All right, now. Yeah, I know. Now, this is, at this point in the year, this guy smiles, I love this guy. At this point in the year, as you know, legislatively, we're hot and heavy. We're hot and heavy. And we're thick in it. We don't foresee any changes, major changes. We don't foresee any major changes, no. However, we won't know for sure until May if there are any major changes, but we don't foresee with the bill as is any major changes to the EL2 or the EL3, not at this point. But we won't know for sure until we get finished with this legislative battle to see if any changes come.
And some other things we see too is try to treat these forms as a whole, meaning, it's not, there are individual forms, but wait to allow the athlete to participate until you have all of them completely filled out. We've run into that as well, where they got the EL2, the EL3, but they don't have the new EL3CH. And I say new still, it's a couple years in. That is also state law. All these are state law. This is not just, a FHSAA policy. These are state law. So again, make sure you have all those, and we keep those for 7 years. 7 years you need to hold on to these forms, even when your athlete's gone. So you need a filing type system. Now, granted, hopefully you will never pull these out again. But we're seeing cases now. We're in a day and age, unfortunately, where more and more lawsuits are coming up. Illinois, I'm giving an example. Illinois is going through a lawsuit now. The state office, the county, the school, the principal, the coach, Kid claims he had a head injury his senior year. He's been out of school for 2 years. They're required to pull up all those forms. So again, these forms, I mean, we cannot stress the importance of these forms. And it's an unfortunate thing. We hope you get them all filled out and signed and you never have to touch them. You know, pray you never have to touch them, and that would be a great thing. But when you occasionally do, it's going to come down hard on you, and it's not going to be pretty. So again, just stressing to keep these forms, again, completely filled out, have some kind of a filing system at your school, and again, hopefully chances are you'll never have to pull them out again. But keep these forms. Anything else you want to add about the pre-forms?
If you can go to bylaw 6.1.
6.1?
Yes. They can be stored electronically. He's going 6.1. He's going to pull it up in the bylaw so you can see it. And if this, yeah. Go down just a tad bit. And I don't know how well you can see it in the back, but right here it says authority and responsibilities of the principal. And that portion that he highlighted, it says keep each of the following but not limited to required forms on file for at least 7 years. And those forms are I can't see it, but the EL2, EL3, EL3CH, and the AT18. Okay? Those are the ones that are required for at least 7 years. Electronically, you can store them electronically, that's fine. As long as, if needed, if a court case comes or a lawsuit comes or whatever it is, if it's required or if it's requested, you can obtain it from somewhere.
And it does mention up there the AT18. We haven't gone over that one yet. Right now, we're focusing on the forms you need prior to playing. There's some other forms we're going to go over here in a second that are in your packet that are forms that could arise as a student athlete is already playing. So that's where the AT18 is. We're going to go over that in a second. Just want to address that. That is also a health and safety form. From the county's level, any other pre-forms before they start playing?
And just one quick note, as Mr. Johnson walks slower, up to the podium, turn to the back of the EL3 real quick. Turn to the back of the EL3. Most people sign these forms and they don't know what they're signing. They really don't. They just sign it because you're supposed to if you want to play. But this is really important. The back of the EL3, this parent, this student is signing this form consenting to everything here on the back of the EL3. This is everything from age to participation to GPA to bylaw 924, non-school team participation. This is everything as far as an eligibility that determines a student eligible, okay? So if you have never looked at the back of the form, you've never read over it, this will be a good review, especially if you're a new coach. This will be a good review for you to understand what are the requirements for eligibility. Is everything on the back of the EL3. So if we did change something, just thinking out loud, top of the dome, it would be including something different in the back of the EL3 based on legislative changes. But you know, we'll definitely let you know. But read over that. That's everything a student is signing to for eligibility purposes.
Thank you, Natalie. So what we're talking about is developing the athletic folder, the packet that is necessary for every student athlete before they can participate in a practice. For high school, so far we've gone over EL2, EL3, and EL3CH. For our middle schools, we've gone over MIS 6347, which is comparable to the physical form, and we've gone over EL3CH. Now included at county requirement for our high schools are 2 more forms. MIS 5348, which is the impact form, and MIS 5358, and Ms. McGinnis, that's a new number for that MIS form. MIS 5358. The form's the same, we just realized we had duplicate numbers. Now for middle schools, you have 2 more forms also. MIS 5342, which is the parent permission form, and comparable to that rules form that Natalie was just talking about is our middle school rules found on MIS 3513. So as you look at those forms, again, the MIS 5348 that both middle and high schools include in their forms have a parent information sheet. From our attorney side and from our risk management side, we feel that it's very important that we continue to offer this opportunity for assessment for a pre-concussed athlete. We require that in every athlete's folder before they practice, that there be one of these forms signed by the parent where they give permission or they decline to give permission for their assessment. Again, as we look through our other forms, the high school 5358 and the middle school 5342, this is in somewhat redundant to our Florida high school activities form, but it's tailored and personalized to Okaloosa County schools, okay? So it's very important that we have these signed off for the high school 5358, for the middle school 5342, and then again our last form for middle school is the middle school rules form, which is MIS 3513, which is comparable to the back page of that EL3 form. Okay? Folks, we can't emphasize, this concludes the packet for your athletes, and we can't emphasize how important it is that the packet be complete before you allow a student to come and practice. If you have a student show up and they haven't turned in one page, the best way to get that one page in is say, Billy, I'd love to have you out here at practice because I've really got a spot for you, but remember, you don't have that impact form. Billy will get that impact form for you, okay? We would recommend that you keep these forms together. Now, what mamas and daddies do when they take them away, we have no control, but we recommend strongly when this packet comes back from the student that it contain all the elements that it needs, and that you simply say, whoops, you're still missing something, I don't need that. That way you know when you have your folders done, everything you need on a student's in that folder. Okay?
And one thing we also want to stress is, you know, all these forms, this whole packet is before the student athlete engages in anything. So if you're a spring sport and you do off-season conditioning in the fall, packet has to be completely filled out. Before they're competing in any school-type activity, packet would need to be filled out.
And just a thought, just throwing it out there, for administrators, athletic directors, ask yourself, and you probably have this already, what is your line of communication? How does your coach know if a student has everything? If the student shows up to tryouts, how does that coach know that the student has everything? The student shows up and says, I turned everything in, but how does the coach know for sure that the student has everything? I've heard a couple of systems throughout the state. One system would be a green card. You can only go and let a kid try out when a kid comes to your tryouts if they have this green card and has everything checked off, and the AD signs it. That's one system I've heard of. I've heard another system where when the kid turns it in, it's packed in, he gets a copy of everything, and when he goes to tryouts that day or practice or whatever, when he goes to tryouts that first day, he hands the full and completed packet to the coach for him to keep a copy of it. How does your coach know? Because you can't be at every tryout as a principal. You can't be at every tryout as a AD. So how does your coach know that this kid should be able to try out? We're talking strictly about forms. So that's where that chain of communication, that line of communication must come in from the head down, okay?
All right, now also in your packet, we kind of alluded to this, those are all the pre-participation forms. There are also some forms you may be having to deal with later on throughout the season. Once the kids are already out there, got the forms in, and they're playing. The next one in your packet is the AT-18. The AT-18 is a somewhat new form. Again, unfortunately, you're dealing with post-head injury, concussion issues. This helps you as a coach to make sure that that student athlete has gone through the proper procedures. If that student athlete has been diagnosed with a concussion, that he or she is ready to come back. Again, as we all see, it's all on TV, it's a hot item now. Again, this kind of walks you through the actual procedure to make sure that student athlete has done what he or she is supposed to. Because again, there's no one in this room who would want to put a student athlete's health in any kind of harm.
Justin,
Yes, sir.
our middle schools use the same form.
Okay.
For a student that has suffered a concussion, we want to phase them back the same way. For the rest of the forms, you'll be covering for high schools, there are no middle school forms. So
Gotcha.
middle school coaches, no need to be looking, once we get past this form, there's no need to look for additional forms.
Gotcha. Thank you. So again, this is huge. It spells out on there your return to play, the policy. It is a policy in your book. It's policy 40. We did mention that Dr. Lynn Keefe is going to come this afternoon after our lunch break. She's she's on our sports medicine advisory committee as a part of kind of creating these forms, making sure we have policies and procedures in place to make our student athletes as safe as we can when they play sports. Because again, we all know there is an inherent risk, in sports. Obviously, some more than others, but there's always that inherent risk of somebody getting injured. So it is in policy 40 that it is a requirement, again, a return to play policy that requires a student athlete to go through certain procedures in order to be cleared. So again, this helps you as a coach. It goes back to that Illinois example that I gave you. The claim there is they allowed the student athlete to come back too soon. And we've all seen probably the highlights, unfortunately, or the stories where when you do let somebody come back too soon, the risk goes up tremendously for that student athlete to get another injury, another head injury, and it's much, much, much more severe. So again, this form is to help to guide you in making sure that student athlete is A-OK to go back to participation. Again, just like the other ones we discussed at the beginning, make sure all these are completely signed. Check out the dates on these. Make sure they are appropriate. Got some other forms. I'm going to let Ms. Strappy address some of those, and these are only for the high schools. Again, dealing with, what happens, student comes to my school, can he or she play, and so forth.
Okay, so this is what I alluded to earlier. When you have that transfer student or you have that situation, any situation, when it deals in eligibility, we're on the EL10. All my ADs are familiar with it. They know it well. The EL10, okay? So for my principals, for my coaches, the EL10, this may be newer to you. This form is for that situation that you're just not sure of the eligibility for a student. What do I tell people? I only can give guidance over the phone. I can't give you anything official, but I'll tell you the same thing I tell them. I would prefer to know for sure than to take a stab at it and guess and be wrong. So if there's a situation, whether it's transfer, whether it's GPA, I don't know, if it's recruiting, if it's falsifying information, whatever it is, if it's a situation that you're just not sure on, fill out the EL10 and send it in. Our job as a staff member of your association is to be able to give you an official answer once you fill out this form. We may ask some questions, but to give you an official answer based on the information that you provide us of what that student's eligibility is. And now, this is twofold. We're going to jump back on recruiting again. Jump back on to impermissible benefit, all that kind of stuff. We're going to jump back over there. If you have that student, that's pretty popular, athletically, that is, and he comes to your school or she comes to your school, and this is a small community. I grew up in a small community, and the good thing about small communities is you kind of know before you get it, or you kind of know when the student comes, somebody's going to say something. Now, you may choose to ignore it, but somebody's going to say something. You're going to hear the birds chirping, okay? So, when you hear the birds chirping, and you're pretty sure there's birds out there, but you hear them chirping, you don't see the birds, but you hear them. If you're not sure, fill out the EL10. This gives you two things. Okay? This gives you, now you got to give us all the information. You can't give us half-truths. You got to give us the whole story. But this gives us an opportunity to tell you if this student is eligible based on everything that you know. So later on down the road, it's football season, it's basketball season, Choctaw is in the playoffs, they're kicking butt. That concerned community member, who was part of the birds that were chirping, finally comes and they call us, that concerned citizen, and says, he recruited that kid, this is how I know, this is all the information. You, at that point, can come and say, this is all the information that we had, we gave it to you, here's the EL10, here's our request for an eligibility ruling, this is your response from the association. We've done our due diligence as an ED, as a principal, as a school. We did our due diligence. We heard the birds chirping, we asked if the kid was eligible, you said he was, because we gave you everything we had at that point. Now, if there's new information, we got to deal with that when the new information comes. But at least as an association, we can say, if you played an ineligible player, it was inadvertent. You didn't mean it. You did everything you could have. You did due diligence. So this form is used for multiple things. Multiple things. Determining eligibility is the key, but it's used not just for GPA and transferring, but for those situations where you're just not sure and you want something official. Send the form in, okay? Any questions about the form? All right. The next form is the GA4. Next form is the GA4 in your packet. The GA4 is the affidavit of compliance with the policies of athletic recruiting. This form is required for any student who transfers after their 9th grade year, after they enroll that first day or start participating that first day as a freshman, and they decide to transfer after day 1, they decide to transfer, this form is required. And this form basically says that me as a student, I'm filling it out, my parent is notarizing it, and I'm telling you I was not recruited by anybody at this school that I decided to transfer to. This form is required. Now, you don't have to send it in, you keep it on file, but on CDC Schools, you're going to indicate that you have a copy of that form fully completed. We used to have you send it in, but now we've gotten away from that, thank goodness, on both ends, okay? And then the last form, let's see, the last form for us is is it in here in the EL11. Does anybody find the EL11? Is it in here? Maybe not. Did I miss it? EL11. Oh, there it is. It's on the back of EL10. It's on the back of the EL10 page. The EL11 is on the back of EL10. The EL11 is in case you want to appeal. Our bylaws and our policies, you can appeal them. Not all of them, but most of them. Unless it's a GPA, unless it's state statute, our committees and our board of directors can't waive a state statute. But you can appeal. Our appeals are offered, believe it or not, from August until April. And you can start turning paperwork in for that school year in July. So for situations, whether it's age, whether it's limit of eligibility, if a kid falsified information, whatever it is, if you want to appeal, you do have that opportunity. Due process is available, and we encourage it. If you want to appeal, feel free. We'll walk you through the process. Your athletic director or principal has to turn in the information. Any questions on appealing and due process? Okay.
as Ms. Strappy was going, she mentioned, the program CDC Schools, just by show of hands, so I know who kind of does it, because sometimes coaches do it, sometimes the administrators do it only. As coaches, by show of hands, do you do anything with CDC Schools right now? Inputting scores, and you have to do the policy 36 course? Okay. Just want to take a few minutes to kind of talk about that program. As you know, that's kind of the main hub now. And some of the stuff we discussed earlier about that packet, you actually have to input the roster before you play a game for that team. The roster of those kids has to be inputted into that team and that CDC program for your school. Also, each individual kid has a box and information next to their name. You check off if you have the EL3 in. The EL2, you can put a date in there so it lets you know. So it's kind of like a helping aid, a guide, if you will, to let you know what all is required. Also, we now require you to put in your schedules as well. Your schedules for those games. Also the score reporting, because one thing we found, and we started doing it for some sports, we're trying to do it now for more sports, is the more scores you put in, we can do a district standings report across the state. And, obviously as coaches, we've seen, that seems to be a pretty popular thing, because believe me, when a score's in there wrong, they call us very, very quickly. So that's a popular thing. So if we can get your help on that as well. We think it's a tremendous program. There's definitely had some hiccups going through it. We're about 6 years in or so now, but it allows you also to kind of promote your athletic program to your parents, to get support. You can do some stuff on the front end. You can post videos of games. You can do highlights. This is a little bit beyond my skill level. You can do some blogging and stuff like that apparently too. So, it's a good program. Get involved with it. Again, score reporting's required. Schedules are required. Also, probably most importantly is the roster as well. All student athletes have to be in there, because as you know, when you get to the playoff time, submitting your entry list to compete in playoffs, kids have to be on the roster before you can put them on the entry list. So that's a quick synopsis. Don't want to spend too much time on C2C. If you have any questions, put them down, and we'll definitely get that information out to you with that program.
Any other questions about forms? Any questions about forms? Mr. Johnson.
It brought to my attention that I used to work practice up there, having the
Tryouts, yes. Yes, sir.
Would you correct that?
Yes.
For me, please?
Yes.
You got the microphone.
He said practice, and your form should be turned in, your kids' form should be turned in before practice. It should be before tryouts. They shouldn't be able to try out without all of their forms. And during off season, without all their forms. No tryouts, no participation at all.
So pretty much before you do anything in an active way with the kids, have the forms turned in. Whether you're lifting weights in the fall, whatever, get your forms in before anything active.
Okay.
When you schedule your games, you turn in forms to my office, and the first form is the MIS 5327, Okaloosa County District Student Request Form. And so when you turn that form in, that's going to cover your students, the children, during their trip, to cover them with insurance from our insurance to and from the ball game. You only need to turn in one form, one of those, for your entire regular season. And so MIS 5327, that's going to cover one form per team per season, and that gets turned into my office. So that covers your students. The next form, the MIS 5085, please note that this form that you have in your packet is it was revised on March 2015. So it was revised last month, and this wants you to try to find the new form. If you don't have, you may have some old forms still at your schools. Let's go ahead and switch to the new form. This form is for each Okaloosa County employee who is going to, look, if you're a coach, you may be a sponsor, you're a coach, you're going to this ball game. This covers you with the board insurance to and from the trip. Okay, so what we need for every sport and every coach needs to have one TDE form filled out, and every sport needs to have one field trip form filled out. And if you will attach a copy of your game schedule to that, that'll cover every single game on your game schedule. That way you don't have to keep resubmitting these forms for every game. You know, I don't really want to sign 25 forms, and you don't want to fill out 25 forms. So if you'll fill out one form per coach, one form per sport for the trip request, staple your schedule to it, send that all together to Sherry Aglin's office, to my office, and then I'll get that signed and approved. Now, for the middle schools that make the playoffs and the high school teams that make the playoffs, then you're going to have to submit additional forms for those playoff games. But that's only when you make the playoffs, because, and all you have to do is, you don't necessarily have to submit a new student request and TDE form. You just need to give me the updated dates. So send me the dates of and the time, location of your playoff game. Okay, so that was the easy part.
Mr. Kutzrow,
Yes, sir.
I don't think we've put in our agenda, if I wanted to take my team to Atmore, Alabama, or to some school out of state, what steps do I follow to transport
Okay,
students
if
out
you
of state?
if you want to take your students out of state, then those forms don't come to me. They have to go to Ms. Jackson's office. She has to give that approval, and then she will then submit that to the school board, and the school board will approve that trip. And so that can't be turned in, 3 days before the trip. We need to get it on the board agenda. I would say if you're planning a trip out of state, about that trip a month ahead of time. Those forms need to be in Ms. Jackson's office a month before you plan to leave the state. That way that'll give us time for us to get it on the board, Ms. Jackson to approve it, and then her to get it on the board agenda, and the school board to approve it. Because you're really, Mr. McGinnis, I'm a little nervous if we're going out of state without the board approval. And
It's all a matter of risk management. That's why the board approves out-of-state travel, because that ties it back into our insurance program. So it's got to be clear about the board which made the official trip approve the insurance program.
Has to be sent to the board of hospital president also.
thank you, Ms. Combes. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, to transport your students, we will be working on a technical assistance paper to define and simplify your options for student transportation. There are several different options, 4 different options, and I'm going to talk about them. The first option, option 1, is traveling with a school bus and a school bus driver from the district. That is one of the most expensive ways to do it, because you're going to take a school bus from your school, you've got to turn in the appropriate form to the transportation department, and then we're going to pay, let's say we're at a 6 or 7 hour ball game, it's JV and varsity, and we're playing in Pensacola or we're playing in Bay County, and so not only are we going to pay for the bus mileage to and from, we're also going to pay every hour for that bus driver, and even an extra half an hour for them to clean their bus, that sort of thing. So that can be $300-400 for one trip. That, however, is there's no liability for you personally in this case, because it's covered. They're on school bus transportation, and you're under the insurance of the district. So that's option 1. Option 2, traveling with a school bus with a coach or club sponsor driving the bus. This is one of the more economical ways to do it, and that would be, one of our coaches. How many? Let me see a show of hands of the coaches that have a CDL license and can drive a school bus. Wow, not too many. You can save thousands, literally thousands of dollars for your program if one of your coaches gets their CDL and is willing to drive the bus. So it's going to cost you some time, and let me just remind you, this is extremely important for your own personal liability. It's going to cost you some time, and Ms. Sherry Curtis is going to explain what you need to do to get the CDL license. It'll cost you some time in the summer, and then every summer after that, you'll have to recertify to drive the bus. But it's going to save your program a lot of money. It also protects us being you and I in the school district. It protects you because you're under our insurance plan. Okay. We have something in this county called a one-way student trip. This is option 3. And only in Okaloosa County do we allow this to happen. And so you may take a bus from Fort Walton Beach to Choctaw, from Crestview to Niceville. It may just be, we're picking the kids up at 3 o'clock at the school, we're going to drive them to, say, Niceville, and we're dropping them off, and they've got to find their own way home. That is extreme, we've got to find our way home. There's some liability there. There's some liability. So if we drop the kids off, we're taking them from school, dropping them at a sports field, and now the parents have to get them home. Well, we have all kinds of situations that occur. We have parents taking, let me just ask it like this. Is it possible that a child will get into a vehicle with another student? Is that possible? That's not good. That's going to open you personally up to some liability issues here. If there's an accident and that kid doesn't have, there's no permission. You can't give permission for a child to leave a sporting activity to ride with another child. That's lawsuit city. That's not a good thing for you personally. So there's too many things that can happen with this one-way trip that it's really, we've got to dot our I's and cross our T's, and it's very complicated, very long, drawn-out process. Just a lot of liability in that. The other thing that there's some liability in is option 4, which is the transportation of students privately owned vehicles. Okay, hey guys, we're going to play in Pensacola on Saturday. Y'all meet me there. Meet me in Pensacola. We're playing at Pensacola High. Meet you at the field. Well, they're going to a school-sponsored event, and that opens us up, the district, you personally as the coach, if you told them to do that, to some liability issues. And so, as far as the most costly, it's going to save you some money. Yeah, you're not going to have to pay a bus driver. You're not going to have to go through a bus training, and get your CDL. But option 1, it's expensive to pay a bus driver. It's going to cost your program the most amount of money. Option 2, it's going to cost you personally some time to get your CDL, but it's going to save your program a lot of money. Option 3 and option 4 have the potential to cost you your job if you don't do everything right. If you don't have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, if the child is transported in a non-approved vehicle, if there's an accident, if it's just too much to go on. So we will cover those options for you, and we're working on a technical assistance paper for that. So we know that those things are happening. We know that we have one-way trips in Okaloosa County. We know that's happening. For risk management, that's kind of it's risky. When you look at private transportation, there's some risk involved there as well. For me personally, too much risk if I'm coaching. From what I know now, it's too much risk if I'm coaching. I'm not jeopardizing my home, my family. I'm not doing that personally. So we have some sign-up sheets for those of you who want to explore the idea or the possibility of getting your CDL license. I think that is the safest way to transport kids. We have bus accidents all the time. I get a call from Jay McGinnis, and the bus is fine, the kids are fine, but man, you should see that car. And the buses are built to keep the kids safe. So I'm going to introduce Sherry Curtis from Bus Transportation, and she's got a few things to cover as well.
Good morning. A lot of you recognize me, and I was scanning the crowd, seeing how many of you do I recognize. There is quite a few of you that already do have your license. Some of you may not be aware of it, but you do, if you do have your license, and even if you chose, and was it option 3, Nick? If they drive your own personal vehicle, I don't remember which option it was. You also would fall under this safe driver plan that we have in our district, in which case I would have to have your license and have to run a check on it. Are you a safe driver? Before you even go out there and try to transport in your own personal vehicle. But those of you that do have your CDL, you do fall under this safe driver plan. You've been there for years. You're just not aware of it. You do fall under it. If you didn't, I would be letting you know that we have a problem and we need to get it corrected. You have a copy of this in your folders. One thing that you are not aware of that you have to do, that all drivers have to do that work for their employer, all accidents and violations in which they are cited or charged as a driver of vehicles not owned by the school board, you are required to let that person know. Those of you that are in the north area, you would let Mary Stevens know. Central, you would let Pam Jenks know. And south, you would let Maggie Hadaway know. It's not going to impact anything, but it is going to get caught. Because once I enter you into our master file, anytime there is any movement whatsoever on your driver's license record, change of address, you went in or mailed in to renew your tag, anything like there's movement, it's going to get shot out and I'm going to get it. I get it every single week, either on a Thursday or a Friday. So it's not going to be like something's going to happen and we don't know it. It's going to get caught. We'll see it. But you have the paperwork, so we do want you to know that you do fall under that. Any of you that ever wanted to transport in your own personal vehicle, was that option 3?
That was option 4.
4.
And let me just say, I just briefly went over the options. We're working on a technical assistance paper to cover them much more in much more detail. So I just wanted you to know there are options out there for transporting students in private vehicles for a one-way trip. Those have the most inherent risk to you personally and your pocketbook personally than the other two. So, but I'll get you more information.
Any of you that ever did want to transport in your own personal vehicle, the option 4, if you have this on your visor, on your own personal vehicle, you do not want to transport students, not with, if you have this warning.
It's attachment A in your book.
Basically, pretty much everything that type of vehicle is going to cover is SUVs, the larger vehicles. The safest vehicle, if you choose to do that, is in a regular car, like a sedan, not a SUV, not a high-profile vehicle. They have a quicker rollover rate. So if you have this, you do not want to transport students in that type of vehicle. Yes.
Okay, along those lines, I'm gonna just, it's not picking on, let me just select tennis and golf. Tennis and golf, sometimes you might have 5 kids, you might have more, depends on the school, but you have a potential to have a small number that it's more practical to transport these kids in private vehicles. And so there are certain liability limits on your personal insurance that you have to have, and those are the kinds of things that we'll cover later in our follow-up. We'll have a follow-up with our ADs, and we'll get you the specifics. But I understand that it may not be practical to take a bus with 5 kids to a tennis match or a golf match. So there are options there, and and that we do understand that.
Okay, do they have this? 12, 11? They do have that? Okay, moving on to student transportation and private vehicles, so that we do cover that, so that you all are aware of that. A certificate of insurance from the insurance company to verify the minimum amount of $200,000 per person and $300,000 per accident of bodily injury liability insurance and personal injury protection. Copy of his or her valid operator's license and an original hold harmless general release agreement governing the use of private autos for school business executed by the owner and operator. Consent from the parents and in the principal's office. All this is done before anything's even done. Plus, I have that driver's license record, and that takes at least 2 weeks to initiate that. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And an off-campus activity form. This is all if you have to fill out that MIS from risk management that you're going to transport in a privately owned vehicles. What he said earlier when we first started, there is a clipboard out there. I did notice that there was one name on it already. I can set up classes for anybody that does want to obtain their CDL license. I try to keep coaches separate from regular applicants. According to DOE, you are required to go through 40 hours. 20 is in the classroom. I try to set these up for coaches every summer so that I'm not having to take you out of the classroom or you're not having to get a sub to get out of the classroom. It's 2.5 days in the classroom, and then we set you up with a behind-the-wheel trainer. Now that person's whole objective is to get you trained and comfortable in driving that size vehicle. Now we have different size vehicles now. Is Rex still here? Rex, do you still have that same bus? Yep. Rex has a 35-foot long school bus. He's got a dinosaur, old one. The newer ones, the buses that we have that start with 14 on them, those are our new buses. They are 41 feet long. There's a difference between what they're accustomed to driving and the newer buses. When you're making right-hand turns, when you're making left-hand turns, so you don't clip people with that back bumper, you need to become accustomed to that extra length that you are going to be driving. Coaches this summer are going to go over that. They're going to all be signed off on being able to drive one of those so that you're clearing curbs and parked cars and signs and everything else. But I can set up classes. If you sign that clipboard out there, I will set up a class strictly for coaches as soon as school is out. I know I had someone that was already trying to get into a class, which I'm sure I'll have more before the end of the school year if you're in a hurry to get your license, but I also have them in the summertime too. Once I know that you want to get your CDL, after listening to everything else that you have to do here and all your other responsibilities, I totally understand why I get phone calls from some of you saying, Sherry, I have to renew, I'm getting close to renew, walk me through what I have to do. I can see that that CDL is not your priority, and I understand now why. I can walk you through, if you let me know, I'll walk you through exactly what you have to do so that you do stay compliant in everything, and I do bring you up with all of that in your in-services. Like last year when you had to claim B so that you were exempted interstate, DOE has gone to DOT. We've made another change. Jay, isn't that July 1st? July 1st of this year. So now there is going to be another change. But by the time I have the in-service and meet with all of you, we will know exactly what you all need to do. But if you do want to get your license, sign up on that sheet. Tell me your name, tell me your school so I can get in contact with you. I will set up a class. And we will walk you through the whole process so that you'll know exactly what you need to do. Does anybody have any questions? Good.
Anybody else in the CDL?
Okay. Sherry did mention the larger buses. They are 77 passenger with air conditioning and storage underneath. So they have storage underneath. Be great for a baseball team, something like that. In me talking with Jay McGinnis, those buses were bought primarily to transport students to and from school. So we're not going to pull them off the road for your all-day field trip somewhere. We're going to leave them on their routes. But if you had an after-school ball game that you needed to transport students, then we need, those would be available to you. Right now, they're available to you with a county-provided bus driver until those of you with a CDL get trained on them. So Jay was talking about this summer. If you have a CDL and you want to be trained on the larger buses, that you can go ahead and get trained this summer so that you can transport, especially if you had a Saturday soccer game somewhere and you wanted to take it to Pensacola, you could load up your kids and use one of these larger air-conditioned buses. That's an option, but not until you're trained on the larger bus. Jay, anything to add there? Okay, just to reiterate, I want to go back to the options. It is the preference of the district that you do one of two things. Our preference is that you either hire a bus driver that works for our county to transport your kids to and from ball games, or one of the coaches of that sport gets a CDL and transports the students. You can do the other two. You can transport in private vehicles if you follow the rules and the guidelines, and you can do the one-way trips as long as we follow the guidelines. And so if you personally are okay with dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure there's no do-overs in this. If something bad happens and you don't have it done right, you're defenseless legally. You don't have a comeback. There's no way for us to help you if you don't do it right. And so as far as Mr. McGinnis and I, our opinion is that options 1 and 2 are the safest bet for you personally. Mr. Johnson, how's the lunch coming?
It's getting close, but what we thought are you concluding?
I'm concluding here, yes.
What we thought we would do is open the floor up for Ms. Strappy and Mr. Harrison to maybe field some high school questions for FHSAA, and maybe 12:10 we'll be ready to serve lunch.
Okay. Okay, so you have a question for me or Mr. Strappy?
I have a question for you. I want to know, is there a district form? We transport the students, say, to the golf course, and the parents want to pick them up and bring them back. Is there a district form we have them to sign them out from us and bring them back? Now, we made a form, but I want to know if there's a district form.
Mr. Barnes, I'm not aware of a district form, but I do know that you have to have written documentation, like the form that you have created, to check the child, to not check out, but to allow the child to leave. So now that you brought up the question, let me give you some specifics. So you are at the match site, at the game site, and you have a parent wanting to take their own child home, correct? Okay, you have that parent sign the clipboard form, notebook with their name, signing their child out, and you're good. What you can't do is allow Johnny's parent to take Joey with him, okay? Unless there's written request from the other child's parent that's already been given to the principal and that she's cleared earlier in the day. So they can't do it on the fly at the ball game. Oh, hey, here's a note, pulling out of the pocket. That doesn't cover you. That doesn't cover you. So that's something that, I would remain cautious of. And also, leaving that site, that game site, a parent can't take someone else's child back to the school. Because now, if you take them back to the school, the activity to get their vehicle, that activity hasn't ended yet. Your sporting activity doesn't end. If they're leaving the game field to go home, the activity's ended. if you're transporting the child in a private vehicle back to the school and an accident occurs, you're still, that activity has not technically ended because you have to get the child back to the school for the activity to end. So there's a lot of gray area there, and that's it's case by case and specific to that. Ms. Curtis has a comment to make.
I just wanted to give you a heads up. I saw the cameras and it jogged my memory. All of our buses are equipped with cameras. There's several cameras on the inside. They are audio too, so that you know when you shut that bus off.
Can't hear back here.
Here, Sherry.
I'm sorry. So that you all know when you use our buses, all of our buses are equipped with cameras. There's several cameras on the inside of each bus. When you get to your destination or when you get back to the school, when you shut that bus down, you've shut it down, it's off. Those cameras are still running for 10 minutes. So as your students are unloading, or if you're standing there talking to them or anything, that camera is still running, it is still working. Just a heads up so that you're aware of all of that.
That's good to know. That's good to know.